Right now, it's well known that Tel Aviv is expensive, but for the first time, a new list published by the Economist Intelligence Unit ranking Tel Aviv as the #1 most expensive city in the world, beating out Los Angeles, New York, Paris, Tokyo, and London, among others. With me to break it all down is head of the Technological Marketing Department at Sapir College and Economic Consumer Behavior Expert Assistant Professor Vili Abraham. Vili, it's great to have you. How did we get here, though? Because #1 is crazy.
Really is crazy. If you look at the housing prices, for example, they have increased consistently about 8% a year. They're expected to increase 10% by the end of this year. And if you look at the average apartment in Tel Aviv, you would have to save about 7 years in order to have 1 million shekels down payment to buy a one-room apartment, which is really, really high by all standards.
So, is it just from housing, or are there other factors that are contributing to this? Because, cost of food, for example, other costs of living.
Yes, definitely. So if you look at the prices of food, they have increased by 9 percentage points just this past month. If you look at petrol, increased substantially over the past few months. So all of these things bring up the cost of living, groceries. Everything you want to buy these days is much more expensive besides maybe fruits and vegetables, which go up and down here and there. But overall, there's a substantial increase in prices. And if you compare this to the average income per person, Israel comparing to the United States, we're about 30% lower. In Israel, it's about $33,000 a year. In the United States, it's about $43,000 a year. So we're paying more for produce, but we're also making much less than other countries, especially if you compare it to OECD countries.
So what does this mean? Let's go macro. What does this mean for Israelis? How can they afford this? And how continue to choosing to live in Tel Aviv? Like, why would they continue to choose to live in Tel Aviv despite Israel's wage and cost of living gap?
Well, Tel Aviv is just one place where prices have increased substantially. Lots of millionaires in Israel live there. But if you look at other places in the country, prices have increased as well. If you look at Haifa, you look at Jerusalem, you look at Beersheba, so prices have increased across the board. If you look at the price of groceries, they're even more expensive in the periphery because all the warehouses where the products are being stored is around the center of the country. So if you want to have it delivered to the periphery, it's more expensive because of higher gas prices. So I think that today we have to be frugal. We do have to think twice before we spend money because I think we're into a period where inflation will just continue to increase. We'll pay more for housing, whether we're paying mortgage or rent. And that's why we shouldn't be buying things we don't need. There are always sales, but we should only buy things we really need and not be, encouraged by different sales, Black Friday and Cyber Monday, to buy things that we don't really need.
Do you have any sort of inkling that these prices or that this issue might start to dissipate, that the prices might come down, that the cost of living might start to average out or become more regular and more in line with their cost of living anytime soon?
Well, they might stabilize sometime in the future, but as long as we have different variants of COVID-19 popping up and emerging, prices are probably not going to decrease, but only increase because of supply chain interruptions. If you look at the United States, there are supermarkets where they don't have produce because there are no truck drivers who can deliver it. There are all sorts of issues around the world. Most of them are connected one way or the other with COVID-19, which is bringing us to a economic standstill as far as economy is concerned, whether it's macro or micro.
So is this sustainable, assuming that the price does not come down or even increases? How long is that sustainable? Or are we looking at some sort of implosive situation? For example, we see mass exoduses and record homelessness in places like LA, where the cost of living has skyrocketed. Do you see anything like that in our future?
That's something that can happen. If you look at the United States, prices have increased very much over the last few years, especially because of COVID-19. You look at Israel, prices will continue increasing, and if the minimum wage doesn't increase, at least here in Israel, we'll really be in trouble. We'll see the poor getting poorer and the rich are getting richer. Which, if you look at the gaps between the rich and poor in Israel, it's one of the highest or the biggest gaps in the OECD countries. So if salaries don't go up, and if the government doesn't manage somehow to bring down prices, which unfortunately doesn't look like it's really trying to do, because if you look at taxes on disposable cups and plates, and from the 1st of January, increase of taxes on sweetened beverages, which is justified, but I don't think the increase, we're talking about 30, 40, 50% increase in tax, which is not justified. And it looks like it's just the government looking for ways to fill its coffers. So a small tax, okay, because you want to bring down consumption, but not what they're doing. It's only going to increase the gap and the amount of poor people in the country, unfortunately.
All right, Billy Abraham, thank you so much.